Alright, hey y'all. So today I'm gonna be talking about something that kind of hits close to home for my generation, the Gen Zers. So I looked it up, y'all. We really is Gen Z out here. So unfortunate, so unfortunate. Not to talk about, I do notice the difference between like millennials and Gen Z. It's not a huge difference. It's not like, because millennials is essentially people over, I think it's like 30 something, like 25 to 30 something, and Gen Z is like 25 and down. That's Gen Z. So we barely made the cut, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm finna be 23, so we barely made the cut, but we in there, which is understandable. You know what I'm saying? I do get along with my niece, and I do love all of the lingo and such, But what I want to talk about today is the origin of anxiety and depression in our generation. I know that we don't necessarily have proof of the fact that our generation suffers with anxiety worse, except for the fact that we just know our generation suffers with anxiety worse than other generations. I was doing some reports for some history classes. Some girl paid me to write her essays, but I was reading up for the reports, and I was writing the essays, and it's so crazy because there is actually factually stuff to support and explain the reason why our generation suffers with anxiety so bad as we do. And look at that, such a surprise. It has everything to do with the trash that is American society. So, little history lesson. There was a point in American history called conformity, right? And that was, as you can probably guess off of the title of it, that was the 50s. That was when we know what happened in the 50s with the white families. That was like the creation of the nuclear family, the middle class. That was when the middle class was created, and that's when jobs and stuff were created to create the middle class. You know what I'm saying? And we got the housewife image. We're gonna rewind it, backtrack it. I hope this video doesn't get flagged. Some of this is actual history, and then some of it is going to be my speculation of actual history, but the way that I'm going to explain it to you, because I'm going to let you know what is facts. You know what I'm saying? And you can go and look it up. And the stuff that's speculation really isn't speculation, because it's kind of obvious once you just look at the facts. So what happened right around the time, or right before the time of conformity in the USA, I believe we were just coming out of World War II, right? And we know what the world wars were, where Nazi Germany killed all these people and stuff, and we were entering into the Cold War era. And I'm not going to do too much talking on it because I'm not a historian, but we all know what the Cold War era is. They teach all this stuff in school. They just don't teach the stuff that matters. But there are very clear patterns that you can pick up on if you just zoom in on them and look at them. And we go into the Cold War era where we start having this beef with Russia. Now, if you do the research in, I believe it was the Axis powers and the other people. It was two sides, right? And America was on this side with whoever, but Russia was on the side with America during the war. And Russia were the people within the war. I think it was like the US, Russia, Britain, and a few other places, France or whatever. But Russia was the country that supplied the most resources for World War II. They were the ones who sent the most troops. They were the ones who had most of the fighting on their land. You know what I'm saying? They incurred most of the damage of the war. So they played a big part in the side that Americans were on. And when you're actually reading the history of it, it kind of makes you question, like, well, if they were on each other's side, how come the era right after the World War II was the Cold War era? How do we go from these people being on our side directly into now we don't like Russia and we can't stand Russia, right? And it was because they, especially in history classes, they make it seem like, oh yeah, the problem that we have with these other countries is that, well, actually they made it pretty plain. They don't like Russia and they didn't like these other countries because it threatened the American way of life. It threatened democracy. But what was the threat to democracy? Communism. We all know that, you know, in America, it's like communism. Ugh, no. And that's the culture that they've ingrained to us. But if you actually done just a little bit of research, I remember back in high school, they had us read the Communist Manifesto. Communism is literally like equality, you know, let's, the people who are in charge, nobody's really in charge. You know what I'm saying? Not to say nobody's in charge because you need somebody to run the government, but it's a system that sets it up that we will all be equal. The largest class will be the class of people who are the same. You know what I'm saying? The rich won't be too rich and the poor won't be too poor. And it's because we'll work to make the rich balance out the poor, so that really we don't want rich people and really we don't want poor people. We want everybody to be equal in the country. And that's kind of what communism is, you know, just in a nutshell. And this is a good deal. This is a good idea, right? This is a good ideal. But what you'll hear in America all the time is, oh, well, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. But they never tried it. Countries that are communist have survived. The only ones, and most of them that weren't able to survive, is because America, in secret, quiet as kept, has attacked these countries and has did everything in their power to destroy these countries so that they won't be successful, because it's a threat to the American way of life. Essentially meaning it's a threat to big business and big money. Okay. I hope they don't flag this video. Flag it. I don't care. Anyways, it's a threat to the as the Communist Manifesto would call it, it's a threat to the bourgeoisie. The reason why they didn't like the Communist Manifesto is because it made it very clear what was going on in America and what was going on in other government economic systems all over the world. The bourgeoisie, right, and the proletariat are two classes of people. The bourgeoisie, rich people, people who have money, people who don't have to work that much, right? The proletariat, workers, the working class, people who have to put on the grunt of the work so that the rich class doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to get off their butt, right? So this is all around the time right before the 50s is about to come into play, right? So the pattern that I noticed while I was doing all this reading was that, isn't it mighty interesting that, because if you know anything about American history, which most people don't, but you can go look this up, this is fact that I'm about to say, American history is not good history. Before the 50s, before the television, people who lived in this country had a clear idea of the fact that this is not the best country in the world. And I'm going to get into why we don't have these ideals today and why they've essentially brainwashed us with propaganda to, you know, make us not understand that America's not a good place. But, you know, my Gen Zers, we know for a fact this isn't a good place. All of us who grew up in America, that's exactly why Twitter is a terrible place to be today. Because everybody gets on there and it's like they just trash American culture. And it's because this is a trashy place to live. And we have a clear idea of that, but it's like, where do we go so wrong? That's what this video is about. And so right before, during the Cold War, during them deciding they were going to ice out Russia, they iced out Russia because Russia adopted communism in the Communist Manifesto. And to adopt communism was to threaten the people in power in America because they were the bourgeoisie. And they knew that if the proletariat, if the working class of America got a hold to the Communist Manifesto, because mind you, the Communist Manifesto is essentially a battle cry. It's a encouragement to the working class to overthrow the bourgeoisie so that it can be equality. Because, you know, obviously, if I'm rich and I got a whole bunch of money at the expense of somebody else and I never have to work a day in my life, I'm not going to work a day in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not just going to give my money to them. You know, like, of course there are people, but like the vast majority of human beings are not just going to, you know what? I think I'm just going to remove myself from the lap of luxury and just give my money away. You know what I'm saying? So that you would have to take that power. You have to usurp the bourgeoisie, the rich class. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't want the working class to know about this. So they immediately, and that's when you go into the Red Scare. And the Red Scare was when they were literally arresting anyone. If anyone said, oh, you are associated with communists, you're a communist spy, this is where we got the idea that communism was so terrible, because they scared the living daylights out of the citizens of the United States. They would arrest people. They would just pick people up off the street, take people from their homes, and they would, for the sake of, protection and protecting the American way and keeping Americans safe, if anybody for a second acted like they were communists, they would snatch them up right off the street and arrest them and then question them and then accuse them. And I don't know the facts about this, but we all know what the prison system is like today. I can't imagine it being any better back in the 50s and 60s. You know what I'm saying? So like, they were arresting these people, and who knows if these people ever seen the light of day again. You know what I'm saying? These people, there are people who are probably in prison just because they read the Communist Manifesto. And this is literally the type of government control that I'm talking about. And that's why it's such propaganda, because in America, we know the culture around communism. They tell us that in the communist society, it's all propaganda, and they show people all these stuffs, and they brainwash them and make them think that communism is good, and that's why we don't like them, because they're taking advantage of people. And oh, China's a terrible place. They watch their internet and they force people to not, and you know what I'm saying? But that's what's happening here the whole time, because they're snatching people. That's the whole, go and look up what the Red Scare is. It's right there on the internet for you. They're not going to word it the same, but the fact of what the Red Scare is that they were snatching people off the street for supporting communism. You say anything about being a communist, now you're a communist, you're a Russian spy, and we're going to arrest you. Russian spies? Like, stop and think about it. Is this a movie? Why is Russia sending spies into the USA to live normal with families and stuff? What does that do for Russia? You know what I'm saying? And so that's the whole source of the Red Scare. And that's the source of why, as in American culture, the second we hear communism, there's a negative connotation behind it. That was never anything that we never got to decide, because they didn't even give us the stupid. I'm not even gonna let you get the chance. They didn't even give us the chance to read the Communist Manifesto and see for ourselves that, wait a minute, this kind of makes sense, because I'm the proletariat. I'm the one who's being oppressed. I'm the one who's doing all the work, and then the ones is who eating for it. There's an African saying. It goes, monkey they chop, baboon they eats. You know what I'm saying? Or something like that. But it's essentially it's talking about proletariat and bourgeoisie. Monkey they chop, proletariat. Baboon they eat, bourgeoisie. I do all the work. You get the benefit of it. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to get into it. Let me just keep it rolling. So that's the source of the Red Scare, right? And why the Red Scare was important. Now, what does this have to do with conformity and anxiety and depression? We're going to get there. It might be in part 2 that we actually get there, but I'm getting there. Because it was like I was doing this history, because you know how history is. It took me from the 50s all the way to like the 70s or the 80s, or maybe even present day. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm looking at the pattern, and I'm like, one thing about it, these professors be out in the government, and we gonna get into that too, because I'm telling you, this is not a good place to be, y'all. That's why I keep saying I hope they don't flag this video. We are really living in that country. They want to act like China is controlling people and controlling the media. The government is controlling the media to make us think it's one thing when it's really not. Like, we really living in that country. And I'm gonna get there. So the 1950s, right? Where did the middle class come from? If you go and do the research, all the way up until the Communist Manifesto became a problem, it was literally the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. It was the working class who worked like dogs and never got anywhere in life. And it was the bourgeoisie who had everything. It was big business, as they would call it. That look up the Gilded Age. I want to say it's around it's the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. That's when we play the game Monopoly. That's not a game. That's real life. Monopoly was outlawed in this country because people were literally, it's the top 10%. You literally have all of the money because you own all of these companies. You've sniveled and connived to you know, take all these other people out of business, and now you're like one person and you own everything in the country. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's power that people, one person or a small group of people should not have. You know what I'm saying? So look up big business. So let's get into the tea of it. Put yourself in their shoes. Communism just hit the marketplace. Now there's countries around the world talking about the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and this is wrong, and the working class needs to stand up and overthrow them, because this is where the idea of there's power in numbers came from. Why are we suffering? Why are we getting treated like dogs and work like slaves, and only about 10% of the population is eating good because of it? They done made all this stuff. Now there's cars, now there's this, now there's that, but there's only a small percentage of the world who gets to use those things. The heck? Where did this come from? You know what I'm saying? Why are we living like this? And so you're big business. You're the rich people from the Gilded Age. You're all these companies, all these people who have monopolies in the country, you know what I'm saying? And you're looking around like, oh crap, they're finna tear us to shreds. If they get a hold of the Communist Manifesto, we're done for, because 90% of this country is the proletariat. The Communist Manifesto is right. Like, they have all the power because they have power in numbers. There's nothing that we could do if they come and rise up against us, right? So what do? These people, the country that we live in, they connive. That's why the world is so screwed today. That's why America is such a screwed place. So they begin to create the middle class, right? I said earlier in the video, where did this idea of America being a good place come from? TVs. They brainwashed us. They used propaganda. What was the main thing that they showed on TVs when they first made TVs? It was sitcoms. They showed families of actors getting on a TV and showing this American dream, the dad who works, the wife who stays at home and she cooks for him, and they have 2 kids, 1 boy, 1 girl, and it's his perfect family, and everybody's so happy, and he makes a lot of good money, and everything's so perfect, and this is the American dream. That is where the American dream was born. It was never born in America in real life. It was born on a TV screen. You know what I'm saying? And so now they're selling this, and then at the same time, now this isn't fact, this is more speculation, but you can check the facts and see where my speculation came from. We just came out of a war, you know what I'm saying? And war times is war times. They were making a lot of materials, plastic, rubber, stuff that they could find and that they could make cheaply, stuff that they can make for cheap so that they could produce at the same rate that they're producing, but they're not going to be using metal and stuff that costs a whole bunch of money to produce it. So now they have plastic, they have rubber, they have all of these little materials that don't cost much to just throw it together real quick. So what do? They put it together, they put a few wires, they hire a few people, boom, you got you a TV. And it shows these cool pictures, you know what I'm saying? And up until this point, we know what it was like when the world discovered moving pictures. It was so amazing to them that they called it moving pictures. You know, nowadays we call it a TV screen and we call it movies. They called it moving pictures because it was such an anomaly. You know what I'm saying? And that was something that was only for a certain class of people, because who has the money to just spare to go and watch a movie when I could barely pay my landlord to stay at my house? You know what I'm saying? So now they're making these TVs and they're using these materials that they found in war times that are cheap to make all these TVs, and now they're giving them to regular people. Whereas before, regular people couldn't have this. Now this is fact. You can go and look it up. When they created the TVs, people were glued to those things because that was not a luxury that regular people had, to be able to have a TV in their house. So they're sitting there watching the TVs like they would just be saying, if you've ever seen Matilda and how they just sit there and watch the TV, it's like they're bright. Okay, it's like they're literally being brainwashed to just watching the TV, because it's like we've never had this luxury, and then on top of that, now we have this luxury in our house all the time, and it's accessible to me. I only have to pay however many dollars. It was still expensive, but it was a one-time expense, and you get the TV for forever, you know, or until the TV breaks. So you know what I'm saying? It changed the game. And now they're showing this idea of the American dream where nobody's ever had this before. They just had to, all they had was their lives to go off of. And baby, it wasn't no dream. You know what I'm saying? That's why they had to keep the Communist Manifesto away from the people. And so they're showing all of this stuff. And now, because of the combination of the TV and the Red Scare, you get, boom, conformity. now everybody's striving to look like one thing, one, because of survival, and two, because of imagery. Anything that is reinforced, whatever you keep showing a human being, they are going to try to mimic that. That's why nowadays in Christianity and stuff, the big thing that we're talking about is vision. Because whatever images you show your mind is going to emulate that and then create that, because that's the power that's in us just because of our creator. And so this TV is showing this image of the American dream. And so they go and they create jobs. They did create jobs. They did create middle-class jobs. So now men are going out and getting these office jobs and doing this stuff that they've never had the opportunity to do before. Go back and do the research. The jobs before the 50s were literally factory jobs. Jobs where you could lose your life, get your arm cut off. You go home, you see those mesothelioma commercials. You're breathing in all types of toxins and stuff working in these factories. Those are the jobs that were offered to people. And that's why it was the proletariat in the rich class. Because how can I advance from being in this class? And then even the idea of advancement in this country came out of propaganda and came out of the stuff that they did to reject the Communist Manifesto. The American dream. What's the American dream? Poor to rich. A poor man can become a rich man because he has to, because he can work his way up there. But the truth of the matter is that wasn't true. A poor man couldn't work his way up to being rich. You know what I'm saying? There were poor men who worked their way up to being rich, but it was because they had an idea, something that hadn't been done yet. You know what I'm saying? And because Ford, he made a car. You know what I'm saying? And but once you get there, because the money is finite, believe it or not. So everybody can't be rich. And they understood this. And mind you, to get rich in this country was to lie, cheat, and steal. You know what I'm saying? So these aren't the type of people who like to share. You know what I'm saying? So even if they were poor and they became rich, and then even we talk about this all the time in this generation, what's going on? The poor mindset, poverty mindset. When you are poverty minded, you're not used to money. So when you get rich, you're like, no, you're not taking my money because I'll never go back to where I came from. You know what I'm saying? So they don't understand the idea of sharing, of doing this thing where I have to share my money with you, and so they create the middle class. They give out these jobs, and they start piping these images into the household of the American dream. You know what I'm saying? So now this is becoming a thing. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, and there was the American dream before this, but it was very clear that there was a difference. You know what I'm saying? Like, there is an American dream if you run over to California and you hit gold and now you're rich. But unless it's some type of miracle anomaly, we have an understanding that the poor will never be the rich. And there's always going to be more poor than there is rich. Now, with the middle class, it came and it kind of confused things, especially because if a working class family that was closer to a lower middle class, or they were lower class, they were poor, they could work really hard, purchase a TV, and then instead of me dealing with the reality of the fact that I will never be outside of my circumstances, I could just sit here and watch this TV. And for however long I'm watching this TV, I can escape the reality of the fact that I'm really poor. And I could think in my head that America's a great place. You know what I'm saying? Because it was the images on the TV, and it was the Red Scare. Oh, we have to protect the American way of life. The American way of life is the best way of life. Oh, democracy. Whereas now we have a clear understanding that democracy ain't really democracy, baby. Because there's the Electoral College, there's all types of stuff in between me actually voting for what I want. And then on top of that, when you really do the research, most of the government is full of lobbyists. If you don't know what a lobbyist is, it is a person who makes laws based off of who's paying them. Who has money? You tell me, do you go to work to pay politicians to put laws that you want to in place? Who's doing that? People who are rich. That's why they still run the country to this day. So, boom, right? Conformity. Now, this is where the anxiety and depression starts to get filtered in and factored in. The Red Scare, it's called a scare for a reason. It scared the daylights out of people. You have to walk around hoping that nobody accuses you of doing something, because you might get taken away from your home and your family at any moment if you don't do if you're not pro-American. Like, if you were not pro-American, then you literally face the chances of getting locked up. Like how we all sit on Twitter nowadays. Like, I don't normally do of course, because I'm a Gen Zer. I don't normally do the, oh, back in my day, you know what I'm saying? I don't normally support the baby boomer stuff, but if they were to get on Twitter, how we get on Twitter nowadays, and talk crap, talk cash money about the government, they would have gotten arrested. They would have never seen the light of day again. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a luxury that we have, and we don't even realize it because the First Amendment, right? Because now the propaganda is, oh, you have the freedom to speech. You can say what you want to say, when that was not the case in this country for a very long time. That was not the case in this country. I could get into it, but it would take too much time, maybe in another video. But the combination of the Red Scare and then the imagery forced people to, I have to attain a certain image in society. I have to. That's why white people are so different from black people at times. You know what I'm saying? Because now they're kind of doing it with black people and social media. But for white people, oh, you didn't play that mess. You know what I'm saying? You are going to, okay, just say, if you've ever seen The Help, look how serious it was to those women to meet a standard, to be a certain way. You know what I'm saying? Like, it created all types of animosity, the jealousy that they had for the character, for the lady who got the best looking man in that area. He got the best looking man, you know what I'm saying? So they isolated her. They alienated her. They wouldn't let her be a part of their little clique because they were jealous of her. And it was because all of this is about imagery. All of this is about the image that we're putting on. And you got the best looking, oh no, girl, you're not coming around here because you're not finna act like you better than me. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there's this whole social structure that's being built up where it's like, it is absolutely imperative for you to have a good public image, right? And so this is where it starts, where this public image becomes so important. And even more so, we start to see the implementation of popular culture. You know, they use popular culture to create the American dream concept and to create the middle class. But after the 50s, popular culture started to take another route. And what they focused this thing on after they noticed the pattern that it was that it's easier to brainwash kids, obviously. You know what I'm saying? So popular culture after the 50s was targeted at the kids. And then you get into the 70s and the 80s and everybody's doing these drugs. You know what I'm saying? It's like, why is everybody doing these drugs? Where did these drugs come from? Rewind to the 50s. We all have a knowledge. This is not secret information, but the truth behind the information is a secret, that Coke, the original Coke, the soda, had cocaine in it. If you don't know anything about cocaine, it's a happy drug. If you're coked out, you're good with life. You're perfectly happy. There's no, you know what I'm saying? It's because you're on drugs. Your mind is on a high. Cocaine makes you produce like dopamines. It makes you produce, that's why they call them dope heads. You know what I'm saying? It makes you produce happiness in your head. Now you're on a high all the time, right? Why would they put that chemical in soda? It's literally a soda. It's supposed to be a sweet beverage. If you were to go to your lab today and you set out to make a sweet beverage to sell to the world, wouldn't you be trying to put different types of sugars in it? Do y'all think it was a mistake that they put cocaine inside of a soda? They put that there on purpose. Why? Because now the Communist Manifesto is out here. And if these people find out that they're really as unhappy about their lives as they should be, we're done for. So what do? We create this American dream. We create this image. And in between these sitcoms, we have a commercial for Coca-Cola. Now Coca-Cola is a part of this image. Now we all drink Coke. You know what I'm saying? There's cocaine in that. So what do? What is that? Let's talk about it plainly. They drugged the American people to make them think that they were happy when they really weren't. They drugged them. They gave them drugs. They gave these people drugs. They drugged them. They drugged them. And you know, I could go on and on about it, but I also just real quick, the same way they did with the TVs, they did with the cars. Why do you think nowadays everything is affordable? Where do you think that word came from? Affordable. They stopped making cars with all those heavy metals, and they started making cheaper cars with thinner metals, the type of metal that they probably discovered how to make during the war, during war times when things were not as widely available. What I love so much about zooming in on humans and zooming in on on things that happen, humans are not preventive creatures. And it's because at the end of the day, we're animals. Everything is a cause and effect. They wouldn't make a cheaper metal until it was absolutely necessary. So in war times, they made it because it was absolutely necessary. We're in war times and we're running out of metal, and this is war. So if we run out of metal, we run out of lives. People get killed. So you know what I'm saying? They made it for that, but then they had this stuff. Now they figured out. Now they had these things disposable to them, so they could create the middle class. If you go and do the research, they created suburbs. Like the government passed programs and stuff to just go and create neighborhoods that were suburbs, to just go and create them. They didn't exist. Go and look it up. Before the 50s, suburbs did not exist. You were either rich, you lived in a mansion, or you lived in apartments. You lived in squalor. Let's keep it a buck and a bean. They drugged them. Right? Then we go into the 60s. Now it's all about social justice. And boom. This is when I was like, this country is evil, 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 evil. But you know what? I'm going to stop right here, and the next stuff is going to be in a part 2. But y'all stay tuned for the next part of why this country is evil, evil, evil after the 60s and the beginning of social justice. Love you guys. Think about it.